Welcome back to Stinging Back. I'm M.
And I'm A. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on vigilante petal hunter groups, the so called citizen crusaders who claim they're saving children online. But when you look closer, the truth is a lot darker.
Exactly. These groups aren't protecting anyone. No children are rescued. No real predators are intercepted before they can harm a child. Instead, what we see is adults who create fantasy child personas and then lure unsuspecting people into conversations. They're not exposing predators. They're acting out their own fantasies under the cover of child protection.
Let's start with how these groups operate. They don't stumble upon predators online, they go out and they manufacture situations. They decide on what age they're going to pretend to be. They decide on what the story's going to be and the personality of the so-called child they create. Then they go on to online websites or apps that are used by consensual adults who are seeking casual sexual encounters. That's right, you heard that right. They're not going onto regular websites or apps where children are expected to be found. They specifically go to websites and apps that are used by consensual adults who are seeking casual sexual encounters.
And here's the kicker: they're the ones who introduce the fantasy into the conversation. They're not intercepting danger, they're writing it, directing it, and starring in it. They create a script and then trap someone into playing along.
So, in other words, they are creating an imaginary minor who is seeking random adult strangers to engage in fantasy sexual conversations online and to invite to meet them to engage in sexual contact with. So they're writing the scripts for imaginary kids and then role playing those scripts. That's not child protection. That's exploitation of their own imaginations.
Yeah, exploitation, right? It's not about protecting real children. It's about indulging in a performance. And then they use that performance to shame, humiliate, and ruin people's lives, all while holding themselves up as heroes to the public.
Well, we know they're not heroes. What do you think, Dee?
What we're going to see unfold is police agencies attempt to regain the PR that they've lost throughout the years. They want to look like the heroes. They want to look like the good guys, and they don't mind collecting a federal grant while they do it. In this case, being right is going to be better than looking right.
Yeah, and that is exactly why, they take it that step further where they tell the public and they go to the media and sometimes even law enforcement. These vigilante groups go to take, their cases to law enforcement. Look at me, I'm a hero. I caught a child predator. And they pretend like their work is about safety, like it's about protecting children online from these dangerous predators who would have eventually found children to sexually exploit and because of their hard work, they stop these dangerous predators from, hurting children. And it could have been your child. And, you should be grateful that we stopped them from doing this. But if you strip away the headlines, it's really about the adrenaline rush they get, the control and the fantasy that they've created for nobody else but themselves.
Yeah, it's all smoke and mirrors. It's like going to a Las Vegas magic show. The reality is, no kids were rescued, no abuse was prevented. The only thing that happens was that a fantasy was acted out, caught on camera, and spun into a headline. Which brings us to the real question: are these groups actually preventing harm, or are they themselves manufacturing harm through their own fantasies? Because when you're pretending to be a 13-year-old online and aggressively pushing conversations in a sexual direction with a mysterious stranger that's an adult, you're not preventing abuse, you're inventing it.
And the public keeps buying into it because who wouldn't want to believe in heroes who are protecting kids? But when you peel back the layers, you very clearly see the fraud that's there. And Dee, you've talked a lot about this. In fact, we just recorded an episode yesterday where you presented on this.
Right. And I read all the emails that come in through Cage, and they just progressively get worse and worse. If these crimes were about any other sting, whether it be drug, whether it be a white collar crime, they quite simply just would not hold up. Uh, the evidence gathering process, it gets alienated about every time I see one of these cases unfold.
Well, and the most important thing is that it's being ignored that, the legal system, those who work in the legal system are ignoring the fact that these are situations that would not have occurred had police not created them. These are not crimes that can exist without police created them because it's just not realistic for kids to go on these, adult hookup forums. Some of them are straight up, adult sex websites. Some of them are dating apps or websites where it's common, for consensual adults to use these to find casual sexual encounters. But it's not realistic for a 13-year-old girl to go on there posting an ad like we see done in these sting operations, or creating a profile as an adult, seeking an adult man. And two things happen in these sting operations before they bring up age. First, they establish that they are seeking a man for sexual purposes. That has to be made very clear first. And so typically by the time contact is being made, either the man's reaching out to them, or sometimes the man is responding to them, because even though these decoys say they never reach out to the men first, that is a blatant lie. There are many of these cases where they did reach out to the man or respond to a man's post or to a man's profile where the man was clearly seeking a sexual encounter. There was no reason to reach out to this man to respond to him unless you were interested in the sexual encounter that he was seeking. And they hide that from the courts, they hide that from the public, they hide that from the jury. Um, so it's clear that by the time they're contacting or responding to the decoy, that it's going to be sexual in nature. Once that's established and the contact has been made, and the decoy understands that the man knows or believes this is going to be about engaging in a consensual sexual conversation and possibly meeting up for a casual sexual hookup, then they say, oh, by the way, I'm 13, please don't be mad. Or, oh, is it okay that I'm only 13? And that's BS. That has 0% to do with trying to save and protect children from any real online threat. And that's what the public is not understanding about this. And that's why we're here to talk about that and to explain that. And that is exactly why this is fraud, because they are lying to you. And, the money they receive is supposed to be about helping protect your children online from those who are truly seeking minors online to exploit. And that's not what these sting operations are about at all. What do you think, Dee?
We've seen it a couple times. I've read at least 3 times where whistleblowers have come out about these things. If it's like a retired DEA agent who's saying, hey, y'all need to relook at these cases, or it's a district attorney writing a memo saying they're being misused, or a county clerk's office saying that evidence is being planted on phone, these men are being entrapped. People are actually starting to whistleblow more and more on this. I think the problem we kind of come into is we fight tyranny when it's convenient for us. We fight tyranny when we're about to leave, when we're about to retire, and we should frankly fight it when we see it. Um, but yeah, no, there's been plenty of whistleblowers on this type of on these things.
I keep hearing, from people that work in the system, well, it just is what it is. And, you can't convince the public right now because there's paranoia about, pedophiles and child sexual abuse. And, it's just hard to convince a jury when it's, about child sexual abuse. But my argument is, but you're not presenting the full story. Why are lawyers refusing to pull up these websites and show the court, show the jurors, show them what this website looks like, show them the steps that anybody and everybody has to go through to post an ad there, to create a profile there, show them, what the decoy had to do to contact this man or for this man or to be available for this man to contact them, and put that in that perspective and show them. Is it reasonable to believe that a 13-year-old girl would have gone through all this trouble to meet an adult man who was seeking a casual encounter with a consensual adult? Like, they haven't been doing that. And I don't know if it's because, it's part of the cover up. I don't know how many of these defense attorneys are a part of the cover up, or if it's because they just don't understand it and they don't get it. But we keep telling them this stuff, and we're still not seeing a lot of it being presented that way to present the whole picture. And that's why it's so easy to get these convictions, because everybody has been gaslit. And I've seen some of these jury instructions. They are deliberately biased, where the jurors are forced to vote, guilty, because they're not clear. Like in one case, it's clear he did not solicit them for sex. They solicited him. In order for him to have violated the law, he had to have solicited them for sex, not them solicit sex on him and aggressively push sex on him and refuse to meet, to just casually hang out. I only want to meet if it's going to be about sex. So you better tell me that it's going to be about sex, and then I will agree to meet with you. That's BS. What 13-year-old virgin girl would ever do that? And that's what happened in this case.
So I think, while you guys are discussing things, I'm thinking about some of my childhood. So while I was growing up, they had daytime soap operas. My mother watched 5 or 6 of them. Every network station had daytime soap operas. And I think the reality TV and podcasts and these pedo hunter vigilante groups have replaced a lot of that. There's drama, there's story, there's sex. There's also elements of, law and order. So, in the new times, it's a big part of everyday life.
That's a very interesting perspective. That's a really good point. I hadn't even seen it that way, but you're right. These people are seeking drama and entertainment and creating it for
They
their
get
own.
put on the social media pedestal by how many likes they get for, coaxing this guy to sit down in a park and claim, make all the claims that he does after they just completely intimidated him. And anyways. So what's the payoff? It's not protecting children. It's attention, validation, and the thrill of the fantasy. They get to play both predator and savior at the same time, writing the story and then pretending to defeat the villain they created.
So let's be clear. These vigilante groups are not heroes. They're actors in their own play, hiding behind the guise of saving children while acting out fantasies that they themselves created. And like M says, yeah, they're chasing the drama. They're looking for that adrenaline rush. This is strictly for their own entertainment purposes, and of course, they attract an audience that's looking for the same thing.
Oh, I bet it is a complete rush. Dopamine, adrenaline, when they go out on these and then go back to edit all the videos and, witness everything that they happened firsthand and then watch it again and witness it the second time. I bet these guys are all complete adrenaline, dopamine junkies.
Yeah, and they get the audience going. It's a cycle of ego. They feed off the drama, the power, the clicks, the donations, and meanwhile, real child protection gets pushed to the side. Well, who cares about real children who are being, targeted and groomed online and exploited? Like, this is way more exciting. Like, saving and protecting real children, that's boring. That doesn't bring all these views and the excitement and the donations.
Or
So
line my pockets.
exactly. And yeah, it doesn't get me all this attention that I just really love and I'm addicted to. So resources and trust are wasted on people who are chasing their own rush.
That is why we say they're hiding behind the guise of saving children. It's a cover story for their own behavior. They're not child protectors. They're fantasy actors in a dangerous, self-made drama.
And think about the fantasy they created. They're sexualizing children. They're creating stories about 13-year-old girls who are just sitting around bored at home and lonely and can't figure out what to do. And so, out of everything in the world they could have come up with doing, this 13-year-old girl, I don't know how she found the adult sex website, online, but she does. And so she decides to post an ad on the adult sex website or to respond to an ad on an adult sex website or to create a profile, on an adult hookup site or to join, or even sometimes they themselves are creating the sex chat and adding random men to it to engage them in sexual conversations. This is a fantasy these people have created. Police do this too, not just the vigilante groups. The vigilante groups learned it from police as well. That's the fantasy they created, and that's the fantasy they're out there playing. And then they turn around and tell the public that this is about saving and protecting children. That's BS. That's their cover up for what they're doing. They're not doing this to save or protect anybody. They're doing this because they get a rush from it. And so when people start to understand this, the whole house of cards comes crashing down because fraud, manipulation, and self indulgence aren't the same as public safety. This is fraud, right, Dee?
Oh, it is. That's why we went into detail about the whole RICO thing, because I have a hard time believing that they don't know what they're doing. And I think they get a grasp of it, several months into the indictment or the trial, where they realized, we may have been a bit more coercive than this. We actually may have created this crime. And that's why we see these cases go on for years. Because you can look at any docket on a court where it's like a routine armed robbery, murder. Those cases are tied up fairly quick. But in these cases, they linger in court. And the reason why is because they violated their rights. So they need to either win one or two ways. They either need to be able to last longer, so the person's ability to make money and then a living is, extradited where they can't, or they need to pressure the person into a plea deal. Tell them that they're going to spend X amount of years in prison, but this is what I can do for you. I like your shoes. I think you're a good person, and I just want to see you get better. And we're going to give you this amount of time. And in prison, in fact, you'll be able to do college courses in that need. And once you get out, you're good to go.
Yeah, they really sell it. And it's like, oh, and don't worry, everybody makes mistakes. We all make mistakes. And they convince the guy that he made a mistake when in reality he didn't do anything wrong. His response was very natural and very normal because these online forums that they're conducting these sting operations on, there is a really good reason for why they're choosing these online forums. And it has absolutely nothing to do with trying to protect children because it's just not reasonable for anybody to go on these online hookup platforms expecting to find children there, much less any who are, looking for random adult male strangers to hook up with and have a sexual hookup with. It's just ridiculous. It's pathetic. But they choose these forums because it's common sense. Most people that use these platforms, well, and a lot of them that use them on a regular basis and have been using them for a while, some for years, for a long time. And so it's common knowledge that these places are full of scammers and catfishers and people who don't reveal their true identity, right? It's very common to use a different identity in these places, and that's why um, it's it's a point that you're going, the minute you go onto this website, if you are chatting with anybody, if you get to engage with anybody in conversation, the goal is to go meet them in person because you want to find out who they are. You cannot know who you are talking to for certain until you meet them in person and confirm who they are. And you cannot be certain about, you know, what about the conversation is real or not, because these are places to engage in fantasy sexual conversations. That's what they're being used for. So to say, oh, but he knew because he was told, he knew this was a 13-year-old child and he was going to show up to have sex with a 13-year-old child. Well, first of all, the idea of sex with a 13-year-old child did not come from him. It came from the decoy. Um, the decoy did not present themselves as a 13-year-old child to begin with. He did not respond to an ad that said, I'm a 13-year-old. He did not reach out to a profile that said, I'm a 13-year-old. He reached out to a profile or responded because they reached out to him to a profile or an ad where they presented themselves as a consensual adult seeking a casual sexual encounter. So it's BS to say, he knew or he believed this to be a minor and he showed up with the intention of having sexual contact with this child. He does not know or believe with certainty until he shows up and has the opportunity to observe or experience this in person. Only then can he truly believe this is a minor and this minor truly is looking for random adult strangers online to have sex with. How crazy is that? Is it something that could happen? I guess it could, but your chances of winning the lottery and winning millions of dollars are a lot higher than ever coming across a situation like this online. And for it to be real, I mean, you can come across it, yeah, because these vigilantes and police officers are out there presenting this. But the chances of this ever being real, ever being a real child who's aggressively pushing sex on you, a random stranger, that's like 0%. So it's BS for them to present this as this could have really happened. In another world, maybe, not in this one.
When all this stuff was first designed back in the 1990s, the ICAC, they came up with policies. They came up with directions on how to conduct these things. Chris Hansen did somewhat follow what the ICAC policies have set out. The vigilantes don't. They've said in interviews, ICAC policies are BS. They don't agree with using those. Local law enforcement and some of the state task forces, they don't believe in the ICAC policies. Why? Because when they first start, they're going to get people that fall to the pressure and they take the plea deals. Those people that continue to fight as they get further into the court cycle, appeals and beyond the original trial, then the courts start seeing the neglect and the violations of the laws. What happened to upholding the law in the first place?
Let me read you something a lawyer wrote about this. He says, the ICAC guidelines are not the law and they are a proper subject of cross-examination. Why are you supposed to let the subject lead the conversation? But not legal grounds for dismissal, and jurors might or might not care about how the cop violated the guidelines. That's his explanation. Basically, it's like, who cares about the ICAC guidelines? And I know the people in Washington have also said that they've been told there, this is Washington State with the, where the nanny sting operations are going on, started back in 2015. They say, oh no, the ICAG guidelines. It's just that they're just guidelines. They're not required to follow them. So I thought that you had to follow the ICAC guidelines in order to receive these grants that they receive from the federal government, but apparently not. It's just like, let's just put them in writing because it looks good. And that way people can think that this is what we're doing. But, you don't really have to follow them. You could just do whatever you want. And if you want to sexualize children and create fantasies about children being desperate for sex with random strangers they can find online, yeah, that's fine. In fact, go ahead and do that because, it's easier to create fake cases of this than to address the real issues. It takes too much time and too much work to address the real cases, the real issues. And that is exactly why, um, who was it that reported there were more than 99% of cyber tips to the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children go without investigation due to limited resources. So they're not even investigating the real cases because they're too busy running these fraudulent sting operations that have saved 0%, zero children, sorry, from any real sexual abuse. And they address 0% of the real problem of children being groomed online. It's insane.
Sorry, I just had an image I had to share with y'all. So, your mind starts going on these topics, and I was imagining, so some of these vigilante pedo hunters, all the rush and all the adrenaline that they get from all of this, and who cares about, any standards of how we're supposed to conduct these things to save the prosecution and, help get these people put away from jail. Who cares? Just disregard all of that. And sorry, I had Alex Rosen in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, the Silence of the Lambs, the villain in that, kind of curled up in the skin in front of the mirror in his, fantasy rush. I wonder if Alex does that. Do you know the image that I'm painting there?
Oh, I can totally see it. And yeah, because it's like I have proof. I have the text message. When I sent him, links and information about true stories of real child victims of this, his response was, "Yeah, I give no shits." Like that was his response. He straight out said it. I don't know how much more clear it can be that he does not care about real child victims of real child sexual abuse. Yes, yet he is out there, you know, claiming to be all about saving and protecting children and, catching the pedos when you just told me that you don't give a shit about true child victims of true child sexual abuse. Like, it's just hard to wrap my head around that. It's
And it's
insane.
all for the adrenaline rush and to line their pockets. And then after he gets his pockets lined and gets his drug fix from his dopamine rush, he wears the skin in front of the mirror. And yeah, anyways.
Yep. And they're so lost in that I don't think he even realized what he said, right? Like that he just didn't care. But, if they truly cared about protecting real minors online from real um true online threats to real minors, they would, number one, they would post as minors online in the places where minors are expected to be found. Two, they would focus on the online forums that real minors have actually been lured from to be exploited. Like that information is available. There's no way they don't know which forums this has happened on. They're certainly not the dating sites or the adult sex websites. Three, they would join chats where minors gather to chat, not sex chats, not adult sex chats or chats that are created to find casual sexual encounters. Join the chats or create chats where minors gather to chat about things kids talk about. And then they sit back and observe the characters and the conversations. That's how you catch these predators because that's where they go looking for the children to lure and exploit and abuse. And four, they would not be initiating or seeking sexual conversations. Because from the beginning, they set it up for that. They're seeking sexual conversations, they're seeking sexual encounters. That has 0% to do with trying to save or protect children from sexual exploitation. Just sit back, simply wait, and allow for someone to initiate that with you, right? You're supposed to let the real predators are not sitting around waiting for children to throw themselves sexually at them. And a real predator would recognize that as not being a real child, because a real predator knows that children don't throw themselves sexually at anybody, much less a random stranger online. And these decoys are very aggressive. They very aggressively push sex on these men. It doesn't add up. Of course, they're going to be confused. Um, at the very least, some of them know there's no way this is a real kid. And of course, it's very natural to want to show up to confirm who this is and why they're doing this, because nobody's ever seen or heard of anything like that before. And number 5, they would follow up on tips from reported incidents instead of just ignoring them like we've seen that they've been doing, because they're too busy running these fraudulent sting operations because they're chasing the money and the highs. That's it.
What I think is interesting is the phrase, they were told so they knew. Let's make an analogy. Let's say me and M were going to our favorite corner Southern church on Sunday, and we're going to partake in the communion wine. Now, most of the time, M, when you go to church, do you expect to drink grape juice or wine?
I want the wine.
Well, you want the wine. I understand you want the wine, but what is it most likely going to be?
I want the wine.
But is it going to be grape juice?
Probably.
Okay.
At
Most likely.
church, yes.
Yeah. It's most likely going to be grape juice. And every time you've been to church, it's always been grape juice. So let's say the police decide they're going to do this real big DUI sting. They're going to tell everybody it's wine. So when they drink it, they think, they think that they're drinking wine when they already know they're drinking grape juice. So, they all leave and police start making these DUI busts. And now they're getting on the media telling about how they protected everybody on the road because they got all these dangerous drivers. In reality, they created it. I mean, it's the argument here is they went to church for communion to expect to drink grape juice, but got wine, right?
Yeah.
So they betrayed their familiarity with the church system. Because why would there be an alcoholic beverage at church? That doesn't make any sense.
Well,
And because
Catholic church.
even
it-
then, even then, sometimes wine, sometimes grape juice. So it's a betrayal of what's normal in these cases, and it creates this level of suspense that doesn't reflect reality, and that's how they're doing it.
Well, yeah, and like this lawyer said, oh, but it's no different. Them posing as a minor online, it's no different from police posing as a prostitute. And that blew my mind. I said, are you freaking kidding me? What do you mean it's no different? There's a huge difference. A prostitute is realistic. If you dress up in skimpy clothes and you stand on a corner where it is known that there are sex workers seeking clients and you go blend in with them, yeah, that's totally believable. That's a realistic situation. What they create in these online sting operations is not realistic at all, and it's not something that happens in real life. It's not something that's ever happened. It's not something that's ever going to happen. 13-year-old girl sitting around home bored decides to go onto an adult sex website and out of all the other categories where she could have posted for that had nothing to do with sex, but she wanted the one that was all about sex. Posted an ad there to solicit random men. The conversation's not about sex because now she says, I'm 13, I'm 14. Conversation's not about sex. She keeps pushing for sex. Well, she did post an ad about sex. Makes it clear she's not looking to just hang out. She's looking for more. What else do you have? I'm bored. The conversation's too boring for her because it's not about sex. And they punish the wrong responses. They keep providing clues about sex. No, I'm looking for more. What else you got? What else you got? No, I don't want to do that. What else? That sounds boring. They keep providing, pushing, oh, I don't want to get pregnant. I'm only 13. random. You don't want to get pregnant. Who's talking about getting pregnant? Who's talking about anything that has to do with getting pregnant? That was a clue that she wanted the conversation to go sexual. And, she had posted an ad to meet random adult strangers for sex. Why would he not pick up on that? Like, oh, she's really looking to hook up. She's really looking for a man to have sex with. But she's saying she's 13. That doesn't add up. Of course, he's going to be confused, curious, and maybe even concerned if he thinks this really might be a 13-year-old. Maybe this is a weird way for her to ask for help. There's something totally off here. It is a very natural, normal response to want to find out more about this very odd situation. And if they're not willing to meet in person, unless you give in to their demands, you have to tell me that this is going to be about sex, which is basically what they did to him. And once he gave in, and then he walked it back, and they made him take it back to sex again, because then he said, "No, we can go hang out, we can go eat." And, "Oh, but I thought you said we were going to go to a hotel and do this and that." And he said, "Geez, I'm trying to be a gentleman." Those were his exact words. And he got convicted of grooming a child, soliciting a child online to meet for sex. He didn't solicit them for sex, they solicited him. And he was still convicted. Why? Because that was not explained to the jury. Why? Because this is a scam and there's too much on the line. There's a lot of money on the line and there's careers on the line. And they know how to play the game. So they're not going to expose themselves in what they did. So that's what we're doing now.
So let me try and my mind is working and running here. So I imagine there's no internet and they're running a sting to where you meet a woman for dinner and she's attractive. She appears to be your age. The conversation starts to get deep and they talk about, adult sex things. And as things get going and they walk out of the restaurant and start heading to, one or the other's apartment, the woman turns around and there's a big zipper down her back and she unzips and takes this bodysuit off and says, "Hey, I have to tell you, I'm only 13. And it's a 13-year-old standing there.
Exactly. That's the wild fantasy they are creating to present to men. And let's make it very clear too, because I've heard some of these guys say, that they were told, "Oh, you showed up because you were sexually aroused." Okay, let's make it very clear which came first. He came across a minor online and then he became sexually aroused, or he was sexually aroused and that's why he was, on an adult sex website, or on a forum that's used to find casual sexual encounters or to engage in sexual conversations, and then a minor was presented into that. And that's what they have wrong. That's another thing that's total BS to say, "Oh, he showed up because he was sexually aroused." No, you intentionally targeted men who were sexually aroused, and then you introduced the minor into that adult sexual conversation because you are the sicko who is obsessed with the idea of sex with children. And you are trying to put that in the heads of other men because you want them to think like you. You are trying to create pedophiles, and your behavior is the behavior that's disturbing and wrong. And you are the one that needs to be watched for these things because who does that? And that's what's not being talked about. And that's what's, the juries don't see that or hear that because, oh, we have to be professional. We can't talk like that in court. And I mean, that's why what's happened has happened because we can't talk about the truth. It's all censored. And they'll straight out say, "Oh, the court does not allow that." Oh, no, no, we cannot talk about that. We cannot disrespect the police. We had one lawyer said that. We cannot disrespect the police. They're allowed to do whatever they want. And that's a real problem.
And when the public sees through the illusion, the truth becomes undeniable. No kids are being saved. No kids are being saved. No predators are being stopped. What we're witnessing is a fraud package's justice.
This is stinging back. And the truth starts with us. Don't forget to check out our friends, Lady Justice Smith at ladyjusticesmith.blog. and our friend Norm, ICAC Unpacked, and Uncageous on Facebook. And then there's a Substack, Caught in the Web, and also on YouTube, the YouTube channel Just Played. That's JEST Played. And did I miss any, M?
Not that I can think of. Our Cage website.
On the Cage website is cage.fyi. And if you or anybody you know has been caught in one of these sting operations, you can contact us at stingingback@gmail.com or on our Cage website at cage.fyi.
If I could just add, if anybody emails us and they're trying to figure out what's going on with their case, because a lot of times lawyers don't contact you on a monthly basis, and you just kind of feel closed in, feel free to reach out. I'm on the Cage email chain. If you'd like or you feel comfortable, you can tell me about your case. I have a lot of years in law enforcement. I don't mind, giving you some level of confidence or talk about how to better fight it. That's what we're all about on the Cage email chain or website. So please feel free to reach out.
And by the way, CAGE stands for Citizens Against Government Entrapment. We are a nationwide group. We have members in 22 states, and these are members that have, that are victims of these sting operations and or family members or friends. Thank you for listening.